Now, I have not talked about Christopher Rufo in quite some time. As a matter of fact, I can't remember the last time I even mentioned that man's name in a commentary or just in casual conversation. But if you're familiar with Professor Black Truth, which if you're subscribed to my channel, you better be, and you should be subscribed to his channel, he talks about Christopher Rufo often. He brings him up maybe once every other month because of something that he's done or said. And I wouldn't be surprised that by the time y'all see this video, Professor Black Truth might have gotten a hold of this story and he's probably already talked about it. But I'm definitely going to have to say something about this myself because I think it's just very, very interesting. And let me just give y'all a warning right now. This is probably going to be a lengthy video. Just giving you a heads up. I tried to decide whether or not I was going to do this as a pre-record or as a live stream. But you know what? I said I got time and I wanted to flex my editing skills a little bit. So when I first came across this post, and shout out to Kid Gravity, this was the first thing that I saw, and I decided to go and do a little deep dive or like go above and beyond with more. So we're going to start with the post that I saw first. So this is Christopher Rufo right here. And as we know, he is one of those individuals who is all about just strictly about white people, especially white men. He's very tribalistic. I mean, it is what it is. But on top of that, he's also staunchly anti-black. That is no surprise. If you're familiar with him, you already know how he gets down. But he is upset with Harvard University because apparently he is not liking their hiring practices because he came across their listing of hiring practices, which I'm going to show later on in the video. And he noticed something that it didn't have enough or any white men on there. So he said that he is going to reach out to get in touch with the federal civil rights officials about Harvard's quote unquote systematic discrimination against white men, and basically trying to do something with Harvard in order to remedy the situation or go even further than that. So as you can see, he says, my team is now in touch with the federal civil rights officials about Harvard's systematic discrimination against white men. And he said, we will always assist law enforcement in any way we can and hope that Harvard pays a heavy price for brazenly violating the Civil Rights Act. It's funny that it's black people that helped get that Civil Rights Act passed. You know, if it wasn't for black people fighting for it, it wouldn't have happened. But, you know, they leave that part completely out. And then they didn't even want black people to have civil rights. But now that we do and have had it for years, now here they come and want to just chip away at it just for themselves. I swear, I'm telling you, they are their clan ancestors, and Christopher Rufo proves us right every single day. But this is the post that I saw, but there was a lead up to how this post kind of spread or even got attention from certain individuals. And that is what's going to lead me into what really kicked this off. So this is where it all began. Harvard slammed as Elon Musk reacts to post accusing university of discriminating against white men. So the reason why the post got so much attention, even though Christopher Rufo has a following, it's because Elon Musk found it or got a hold of it, and he just merely replied to it. And then that's how it spread like wildfire, even more than it already had. It said an X post alleged that Harvard University is discriminating against white men to, quote, increase the proportion of women and minorities in the university. And I think when I was looking at it, it wasn't talking about necessarily the student body, but they were talking about the faculty and staff. Like I said, later on, I'm going to actually pull up that list because Christopher Rufo, I guess he pulled up the list about who's hiring and like who got hired, and it tells you, and it breaks it down by gender, and then it'll tell you ethnicity, or it'll put something there. I'll show it to you when I get there. But let's go ahead and read the article that this is attached to, and we'll go from there. It said Elon Musk sparked a social media frenzy after he reacted to a post accusing Harvard University of discriminating against whites, men, and especially white men. Many responded to Musk's post and slammed the centuries-old educational institution. It all started with a post by American activist Christopher F. Rufo, who wrote Harvard actually wrote a plan to increase the proportion of women and minorities in certain occupations to more than 90%. It's not about equal opportunity. It's about punishing whites, men, and especially white men. Now, I want you to really think about what he just said right there. Punishing whites, which means he's talking about white people in totality. That's white men and women. Then he just said men. So I'm guessing now he's speaking for all men, no matter what the group is, but then came back and say especially white men. And that's it. Like when I show you the chart, then you'll see what he's like really saying. He really wants to just say strictly white men, but he has to phrase it in a way that doesn't make it seem like he's being completely just, shunning everybody. But we can see through his code speak. He ain't fooling nobody. It says Musk reshared Rufo's X post and reacted to it with one word. He wrote, "Wow," while showing his reaction. It goes on to say or ask, how did social media react? It says, as an individual wrote, "I am calling for Harvard to be stripped of its accreditation. Their endowment won't matter if they can't matriculate students." Another joined, saying, "Unacceptable. As a woman, this is outrageous." A third commented, "Harvard cannot be more disgusting. Defund them. They do not deserve to be in business." A fourth remarked, "This is discrimination." This is not the first time Elon Musk has expressed his opinion about Harvard University. In April, he reacted to a post by former Sun Microsystems CEO Scott McNealy. And no one or organization on campus should be taking money from said government, nor should they get a tax break from the citizens who are taxed to pay that private institution. Defund Harvard, McNealy posted while reacting to an X post by Harvard, where the university publicly announced that no government can decide what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. This came after Donald Trump hit out at the prestigious university for refusing demands on the White House. Elon Musk had reacted to McNealy's X post with a quote 100% emoticon. U.S. President Donald Trump's administrations had previously canceled $2.2 billion in federal funding to Harvard University. In a recent statement, the administration announced that 8 federal agencies will further terminate another $430 million in grants. Only all of this because they don't like their hiring practices. Like, really let that sink in right there. And now that Christopher Rufo has gotten a hold of this, and you saw what he said at the beginning, it's only probably going to get worse. Imagine you had a flow of how you're doing your hiring practices with no problems, and boom, it gets overturned or tries to get overturned in one fell swoop because a couple of white men want to be whiny little spoiled brats and try to come in and ruin what you have going for you that's working like a well-oiled machine. That's crazy. Now, this is the post that I was talking about that has the chart on it. Let me read to you what it says. This is the post right here that Elon got a hold of, and that's why it went even more viral than it did. He said, Harvard actually wrote a plan to increase the proportion of women and minorities in certain occupations to more than 90%. It's not about equal opportunity. And then he said it was about punishing white men, whites, men, and especially white men. And this is just basically, it says Harvard University's annual plan for 2024. So mind you, this was last year. Okay, this was drafted and put out there on New Year's of last year. So you're talking about over a year ago. And it's just basically a rundown of all the different occupations, all the classes or like professor spots. It also has like the number of employees, and it says protected class, job group, employment percentages, availability, and the current year goal. And then if they notice down the list where it says protected class, it says minority and female down the list. So he's upset because white men are not falling into the category of protected. That's why he's upset. He feels that they should be under that category as well. But see, the thing is, why would I still question why even white women are under that protected group as well, but that's a whole nother story for another day because they're by default an extension of their men. But why would white men be under a protected, under that particular class? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But see, then again, I don't know how Harvard is really doing this or even why they're doing it. That's really none of my business. It is what it is. But apparently Christopher Rufo and Elon Musk have a problem with it. So, hey, now Harvard has to deal with whatever it is that they're talking about, but I just find it very interesting because these are the same people that love to tell black people all the time to stop making everything about race, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just work hard and you'll get there, and all this, that, and the third. Yet they're up there complaining because, and by there I'm talking about Christopher Rufo in particular, because Elon Musk wouldn't have saw this if Rufo didn't put this out there. People like Christopher Rufo up there whining and complaining about this, and for what? It's like they already have everything handed to them on a silver platter, and that's still not enough. It's never enough. But like I say, with power, you can get a certain amount of power and it can be good. It could take care of you and you're good. But the thing is, you're lusting for more power. That greed kicks in and you want more and more and more because you feel what you have is not enough, even though that it's clear that it is. But speaking of Christopher Rufo, when I was scrolling through this particular post, I scrolled down a little bit because I wanted to see what the comments looked like. But the first comment that I saw was also from him, in which he left a link to the article he wrote up about this on his website. I guess I forgot the name of that foundation that Christopher Rufo's over, but one of those, it's almost like the Heritage Foundation. It could be that, but he wrote an article on this website, and we're going to go over that article right now. So here we are on the cityjournal.org website. And if y'all don't remember, the last time I think I did a video on Diane Yap, she had wrote an article on this website, or for this website, called City Journal. And I didn't know what it was until people had told me in the comments, and they said, oh, that's one of those foundation, one of those type of websites, and that people like Christopher Rufo is attached to it. And then I keep forgetting that Diane Yap was or is attached to Christopher Rufo. So think about all the stuff that this woman has said about black people, and that's who she is linked up with. So I said, oh, it all makes sense. So when I saw this article right here and where it came from, I said, it reminded me, it took me back to that. But let's get into it. He wrote this article along with someone named Ryan Thorpe. So it looks like it was co-written. He said, inside Harvard's discrimination machine, the university has adopted race-conscious hiring practices, potentially in violation of civil rights laws. They wrote it on May 14th, 2025. They said the Trump administration has escalated its battle with Harvard University, freezing all future grants and threatening to strip the school's tax-exempt status. In response, Harvard has adopted some conciliatory measures, rebranding its DEI office and canceling its racially segregated graduation ceremonies. But behind the scenes, the university's discrimination machine continues to operate at full capacity. First off, racially segregated graduation ceremonies, I didn't even know they used to have that. That's crazy. We've obtained a trove of internal documents that reveal Harvard's racial favoritism in faculty and administrative hiring. The university's DEI programs are more than, quote, unconscious bias training. They are vectors for systematic discrimination against disfavored groups, namely white men. So right here, he's telling you right here in the article, he's specifically talking about white men. But remember when I went over the post, he said whites, men, and especially white men. I'm telling you, that's really what his focal point is trying to shoehorn white men in wherever they can get in. This is why I say remember when I keep telling you about how when black people have stuff for themselves or they create organization, what's that guy's name? I forget his name. I've talked about him too. Not Christopher Rufo, but the other guy. And I'm sure someone knows exactly what I'm talking about and is going to write it in the chat or the comment section. Every time black people do something for themselves, or it's an organization or some kind of a program, here this guy comes. I don't know how he be finding it out. And he has to throw a wrench in there somehow to try and shut it down. And sometimes, and a lot of times, it's often successful. Christopher Rufo is effectively doing the same thing, all because whenever they say that they don't like inclusion, trust me when I tell you they're lying. Because the minute you do something that's separate from them, they try to shoehorn their way in to be included. And if that doesn't work, then they'll try to come up with something to get you shut down or start stripping away at things until you comply with whatever demands and requests they have. I'm telling you, they are some very spoiled brats when they don't get their way. And they have the nerve, the divine nerve, to sit up there and talk about us. It goes on to say, as one Harvard researcher told us, endless evidence suggests that the university continues to discriminate against the supposed oppressive class in hiring and promotions. For years, Harvard's DEI department has explicitly sought to engineer a more racially diverse faculty pool. The university-wide inclusive hiring initiative provided guidelines and trainings for those involved in the hiring process and was explicitly tied to Harvard DEI goals. The stated mission of the initiative is to instill an understanding of how departments can leverage the selection process to build an increasingly diverse workforce. In another hiring guide, Best Practices for Conducting Faculty Searches, the university recommends several discriminatory practices. At the beginning of the hiring process, Harvard instructs search committees to ensure that the early lists include women and minorities and to consider reading the applications of women and minorities first. The university counsels that committee chairs should continually monitor the racial composition of the candidate list as they narrow it down. Attend to all women and minorities on the long list. Harvard deliberately factors race into the hiring process as if Christopher Rufo doesn't do it. He just specifically said that they are not putting white men on there or out in the front. And here's the thing. Let's just say that Harvard had put white men on there. I have a feeling Christopher Rufo will still whine and complain that it's not enough. Because see, the thing is, when their people's version of inclusion, the thing is they claim they don't like inclusion, but they want it. They really want it. But the thing is, they want to dominate that part. So the thing is, you saw the list that I pulled up. You saw how it said minorities and females on there. If 90%, and we'll just go with 90 because that's what the number he threw out there. If that thing was 90% white men, he would have been all for it. Now, let's say if it was split evenly 50-50, where it was 50% white men and everyone else was quote unquote minority and female, he would have a problem because he's not trying to even be balanced with that. It has to be, in his eyes, dominated by white men. And it doesn't just have to apply to this situation. It could be anywhere across the board. If they had a domination or a huge majority factor, they would not be sitting up here complaining about no DEI or being inclusive or diversity and all this other stuff. They would be all for it. Trust and believe me. I've said that several times and I truly, honestly believe it. It's really an envy thing or feeling like, why am I being left out? I should be here, because the thing is, they've been included or shoehorned into things all of their lives. And the very thought that they are excluded is for some reason just bringing their world to rumble, or it's shattering their dreams. I don't know what it is, but I truly believe that's what it is. And up until this point, and even probably past this point, I have yet to be debated on that one, because I truly believe, without sounding cocky, that I am correct in that assessment. So let's go and continue on with the article. It said Harvard deliberately factors race into the hiring process. The university gives committee chairs privileged access to self-identified demographic data, including gender, race, and ethnicity, and encourages chairs to use this information to encourage diversity in the applicant pool, long list, and short list. Harvard admits that some of its hiring programs have explicit placement goals for women and minorities, which, despite the university's denial, functions as a soft quota. In the past, the university has made extensive use of DEI statements, a required qualification for all position descriptions and job postings, and university supplied diversity-related sample interview questions, which effectively filtered out candidates who did not adhere to the principles of left-wing racialism. Though Harvard's Faculty of Arts and Sciences officially discontinued its use of mandatory DEI statements last year, the university continues to promote non-mandatory diversity statements for faculty positions that include language about diversity, equity, and inclusion as guiding principles. Gail Harriot, or Harrio, a law professor who sits on the United States Commission on Civil Rights, characterized Harvard's practice of making candidates swear fealty to DEI as a form of ideological conditioning. At other universities, faculty candidates who respond to such inquiries by saying that they treat all individuals equally regardless of race, ethnicity, or sex get excluded from consideration, she said. The same is probably in store for any job candidates at Harvard who dissent from the campus orthodoxy on this issue. Harvard's discriminatory programs are not limited to faculty hiring. According to one of the internal documents we obtained, the university has adopted explicit racial hiring goals for administrative and support positions under the guise of affirmative action. For various divisions and occupations within the school, Harvard lists the percentage of each workforce that belongs to a quote protected class, as well as target goals. For example, the university declared a goal of increasing the share of minorities in one department's alumni affairs office nearly sixfold and raising the share of female assistants in the School of Public Health to more than 90%. And see, like I said, he's mad because white men don't fall into that category of even being protected. But like I said earlier, why would you need to? Like, seriously, why would you need to? Employers seldom set goals like these if they don't intend them to be acted on, Harrio said after reviewing the document. These particular goals are hilarious, she added. Harvard has a few job categories that are already female dominated, sometimes with an over 70% of its employees in those categories being female. Rather than being concerned with why more men aren't applying, Harvard sets a goal to make these jobs categories even more female dominated. These goals also potentially violate civil rights law. Dan Morenoff, executive director of the American Civil Rights Project, suggested that the document may legally expose Harvard. The document appears to violate the provisions of Executive Order 11246, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965 and rescinded by President Trump earlier this year. Harvard's plan lumps together all racial and ethnic groups other than white people under the rubric minority. Morenoff said, which courts have found to be a violation of racial balancing rules. Harvard asked whether it still operates these programs, did not respond. The only major change to the university's faculty hiring process, of which our source was aware, was the above-mentioned repeal of mandatory DEI statements at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. These policies, while comfortable, are no secret on campus. According to the Harvard researcher, the university's current hiring policies for staff, administrative, and faculty positions are deliberately discriminatory. Harvard has strayed from its foundational mission of unbiased truth-seeking and has instead become ideologically driven, the researcher said. This is a totally corrupted institution. So that right there is the entire article in which Christopher Rufo wrote as it pertains to that particular statement, well, at least what Harvard is doing right now. So again, all it really boils down to, or all it really goes back to, is that they feel like they should be in a position that Harvard did not put them in. And it's like, we're not even complaining about that because we already know what our position is when it comes to Harvard anyway. But you don't see us complaining about it. But see, again, they feel like if they're not in control of something or they're not dominating in something where there is control, then we have to ruin it in order for it to actually function, because they feel like nothing can work without them. That's really what it also boils down to. They feel like we are the only ones that knows how this thing works. Why are you giving it to other people? Even if they're not qualified, they still want in on it. Now, the last thing I'm going to go over, and I thought this was very interesting, was under that same post, somebody wrote to Grok. Now, in case y'all don't know what Grok is, that is the installed AI system on X. And somebody posed a question to Grok, and we're going to go and go over the response that Grok gave. So this person responded to the post that I just read under Christopher Rufo's post on Twitter. And they said, Grok, isn't this just a federal compliance document? Is Rufo's takeaway from it at all accurate or fair? Grok decided to respond with, it says, hey, let's dig into this Harvard doc and Rufo's hot take. You're right to question if this is just a federal compliance document. Spoiler, it likely is, but there's more to unpack. The image Rufo shared looks like a standard workforce utilization analysis, which universities like Harvard, as federal contractors, are required to submit under the Office of Federal Contract Compliance programs known as OFCCP rules. These reports analyze the representation of women and minorities in various job categories compared to their availability in the labor market. If there's a gap, the feds expect you to set goals, not quotas, to address it. So the 90% figure Rufo's clutching his pearls over, that's probably a target for underrepresented groups in specific roles, not a sinister plot to quote unquote punish white men. And the crazy part about that response, especially that last part, is I'm sure Christopher Rufo knows that, but in order to make an argument just for the sake of making one on the behalf of white men, he just decided to write this out. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew how he could get his audience riled up. And it goes on further to say, now, is Rufo's takeaway accurate or fair? Not really. He's framing this as a deliberate attack on white men, which is a stretch. The doc isn't about punishment. It's about meeting federal guidelines to avoid getting smacked with discrimination lawsuits or losing government funding. Harvard's not cackling in a back room about how to stick it to white dudes. They're just checking boxes to keep Uncle Sam happy. That said, Rufo's got a point that these kind of policies can sometimes prioritize optics over merit. Let's not pretend otherwise. If a job category ends up 90% female or minority because of aggressive goals, you can bet some qualified white guys might feel sidelined. It's a real concern. But Rufo's blowing it into a conspiracy when it's more like bureaucratic hoop jumping. Here's the kicker. Harvard's been all in on diversity for years. Check their own statements about creating an inclusive culture. This doc aligns with that mission, but it's also a legal obligation, not a manifesto to erase white men. Rufo's reading it through his culture war lens, which makes for spicy tweets, which he clearly posted right here that we went over earlier. Rufo's reading it through his culture war lens, which makes it spicy tweets, but misses the mundane reality. On the flip side, if you think these policies never lead to unfair outcomes, you're kidding yourself. It's a messy balance, and both sides have some truth to chew on. So while Grok does make some lean into what Christopher Rufo was saying, most of it is just gaslighting himself and his audience, especially his white male audience, because of something he sees on a surface level. And it also gives him a opportunity to write something up on his City Journal page, and then Elon got a hold of it, and then it just blew up into this and all this, that, and the third. Like I said, he's just being a whiny, spoiled brat. That's all it boils down to. Well, if I can't get in, then, or people like myself can't get in, well, guess what? I'm going to go and contact this person and that person. I'm going to write up this blog post. I'm going to put it out there and see what catches on. And now Christopher Rufo has a new mission. So you can expect that he's probably going to be talking about this for a little bit of time right now. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. We've been on here for nearly 30 minutes talking about this, and I know y'all are probably just going in the chat right now. Y'all probably going in them comments, and I can't wait to see what y'all got to say. So with that being said, y'all have a good one, and I will talk to you in the next one.